Okay, we're going to move on, and this time we're going to do a full page. So we're in our scene, in our folder, we're going to create a new scene here. We're just going to name this full page or full screen, however you want. We're going to go ahead and double click on this thumbnail to open the scene. It tells you that the scene is open down here at the very bottom, Design Tutorial 1 Full Page. We're going to start by adding a group, and let's just, again, rename this. We'll call this Full Page Group. This will be our top level group. I'm going to begin by creating a background basically. So I'm going to go into my built-ins geometry plugins, and I'm going to drag a rectangle down. I'm going to click on the rectangle into or on the transformation editor here, and I'm just going to hit screen, and that's going to fill this rectangle to the screen. I'm going to go back into the server, into my I tab, and I'm going to drag this BG1 image down onto it. And here you can see this is the result of the image, so I'm just going to keep it like that. If you want to add some color to it, which I actually think I may, so I'm going to come into the rectangle editor here, turn on use vertex colors, and I'm just going to add some color here so we can add a little bit of gray or blue or whatever you want. So I'm just going to use a little dark gray and copy these down to the corners. Maybe I'll leave these two white for now. So I'm going to go back into the built-ins, and I'm actually going to add another rectangle here. So I'm just going to slide another rectangle here, and because I want to map some type of image to it as well, I'm going to use the width and the height adjustments in here. So I'm going to type in 500 and 500, maybe we'll just scale it up that way. I'm going to come back into the transformation editor and rotate it a little bit and position this down in the lower left corner. So I want it to stretch from corner to corner, so I'm going to go back into the rectangle here and adjust the width some more. So roughly take it up to a variable around there. I'm going to go back into the server, and I'm going to use the other BG image on my rectangle. So I'm going to slide the BG image 2 on there. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to change the mapping to vertex here. And now you can see again we have a different texture, and I'm going to go into the rectangle again, turn on the vertex colors, and use this color wheel here to kind of give it a little extra depth or color here. So let's lighten that bottom part up, and we'll just keep it something around there. Again, you can add your various colors that you want to this scene. We're going to leave it as is for now. I do have a picture of our full screen, what we want to create here. So let's drag this in briefly and just take a look at it. So I'm going to throw this in the background. Let's hide our full page for the moment. So here we have these two background elements. It looks like we have a couple of Noggis up here, maybe another rectangle and some text. Of course, we have our logo as well that we'll want to incorporate. So we're going to begin by designing some of these top banners here, and we're just going to use the Noggis for these. I'm going to go back into the scene settings and just drag my background image in here to replace this full screen image, and I'm going to turn my full page on again. Now, since I didn't group these to begin with, I'm just going to throw these two back plates or two rectangles into a new group. So I select them both by hitting Control, and selecting this little group button here will then place them in a group, and let's call this our background. So I'm going to close that off, and I'm going to begin by adding our headline banners. So I'm going to go up into the built-ins. I'm going to drag a Noggi down in as a subcontainer of my headline banners. I'm going to click on my first Noggi here, and I'm just going to adjust the width here to about 500. I'm going to first take my stretch down to about -20, and I'm going to take my corners of each bevel down to 0. I'm going to slide this up near the top here, something like that. Now I want this edge of the Noggi to match the corner of this rectangle. So however you choose to do it, you can stretch this more to match it, or we can leave this at -20 and come back into our rectangle and rotate this however we need to. So if I wanted something like that, I can just slide this over then. So I'm going to back that off actually a little bit, and instead of doing that, we're going to just use the Noggi to match it. So I'll just take this stretch down to roughly something about there. I'm going to go back into my server and just add that BG image onto this Noggi. Again, I'll click on it and just scale my image up a little bit. I'm going to also drag the black material on it. When I do that, it takes away the texture. So if we back off a little bit on the black, we'll add some gray instead of black, and now you can start seeing a little bit of texture through there. Also the height, a little bit too much, so I'm going to back off the height as well. So I'm just going to make something around 50, let's say, and we'll move this up towards the top of our title area and safe areas. I'm also going to make a Noggi on the right hand side. So I'm just going to copy this by holding down Control. I'm going to replace our texture with the green, and I'm going to get rid of our black, and I'm going to take this Noggi and slide it all the way to the left. I kind of want it behind my black one, so I'll readjust the Z position. So I'll move the black Noggi up one and our green Noggi back one. If I want to back off the width of the Noggi a little bit, I can. So I'm just going to place it something like that and adjust the height a little bit more, adjust the Y position down. So I'm going to add a couple of more Noggis here to create our headline banner. So let me just group these first and block these off. These are kind of like just some back plates here for design, so I'm just going to label them as such. I'm going to go into my built-ins, drag another Noggi down here, and this is going to be my white headline banner. Again, naming conventions you can follow however you need. So I'm going to go into my Noggi editor here. I'm going to say roughly the width is going to be maybe about 400. The height maybe we'll take down to about 50 for right about now. We can always readjust. I'm going to take my bevels of each corner down to 0 for now. I'm going to keep my stretch at 0, so I don't want it to stretch at all. I'm also going to adjust the bevel bottom left here to about 20 again. I'm going to move this up towards the top and again bring it forward in Z position. I also want to adjust the height a little bit now because it's too high, so we'll just roughly place it around there. And we'll go into our server, and I'm going to use the white swatch here to give it some color. I'm going to click on the white swatch to go into the mapping, and I'm just going to scale this mapping up here. So let's do it on the single scale. We'll stretch the Y out and we'll decrease the Y scale. So we stretched the X scale out, and decrease the Y scale. All right, so one other quick thing that I'm going to do here, I'm just going to copy this Noggi. I'm going to get rid of that white swatch, replace it with the green swatch. I'm going to go into my Noggi, and instead of using this geometry type area, I'm going to switch it to outline, so it gives us an outline. First, I'm just going to go into the image, and we see it breaking up here with these little lines. So I'm just going to either scale it up as a linear image, or I'm just going to switch it to vertex. So let's go back to linear, and let's just lock these and scale them up so we don't have any interruptions in that material or image. Now if you want to go back into Noggi and kind of adjust the outline width, right now it's set to 1, so if you want to back off of that a little bit, you can as well. Alright, so that's our headline, and let's group that and just rename that group just to organize this a little bit. I'm going to then make a subline, so I'll add another group to help myself organize, and I'm going to go into the built-ins, and we're going to use the Noggi again. So we're going to click on the Noggi. This time let's take it out to about 400, maybe 450 this time. We're going to take the bevels down to 0 on each corner. We're going to stretch this to match that rectangle again. So these two edges here roughly meet, and it's roughly around -60 or so. So I'm just going to leave it as that. I'm just going to place this up around here, and if you want to offset it a little bit or place it up on the Z square or Z space, you can as well. If you want to go a little bit smaller increments, you can hold down Control and click on the little black triangle, and this will move it up like 0.1. So place it wherever you need to. I want it in front of this black one, but behind this white banner. So I have to do some adjustments here to my Z spaces. Let's move this headline up 1 or 2. Let's try to move this Noggi up again, and there it is. I'm going to go back into my server. I'm going to add in this background image to this again. We can scale this up as well, And let's just back off the height. So I'm going to readjust the height here and readjust this. Okay, roughly it's taking shape. So now that I have that, I'm just going to copy that again. I'm going to replace the image with this green texture, and I'm going to go into the Noggi, and instead of doing the geometry type as area, I'm going to do it as outline. So this is our subline. This is where the text will go. Next thing that we'll need is the actual area where the full screen is going to be placed, and that where they can type it. So we'll go ahead and create a new group, and we'll just call this like text plate or something. So I'm going to go into my built-ins. I'm going to drag a rectangle down here, and I'm going to use the rectangle editor to adjust the width here. So let's go 500 and 350. We'll bring this up in Z position or back it off a little bit. Height a little bit too much, so I'm going to readjust that, move the position back down, and I want it on top of this Noggi. So let's move it up in front. Height and width, you can pretty much eyeball this as to where you want it. For now, I'm just going to keep it here. Again, I'm going to go into my server and use one of these BG images to give it a little texture. So I'm going to drop it on it. I'll just scale it up, and since this is a rectangle, we can go into the rectangle editor and add some color to it. So I'm going to use this vertex colors. I'm going to turn that on, come into my color editor, and maybe add some color to this. Right now, I'm just going to add some black to this, and in the middle maybe some gray, or maybe give it a little bit of color here with some blue or some green or yellow or whatever you want it to do. Now that I have that, I'm also going to copy that to create an outline for it. So I copied it. I'm going to get rid of the image on it by dragging that particular image to the trash. I'm going to go into my rectangle, and I just want to use the green. So I'm going to copy the green swatches to replace the other colors here. Now it's still a filled area, so I'm going to use a plugin called the Expert to create a stroke. So I'm going to go into my built-ins, into my container plugins, and into the globals folder and drag this Expert down onto my rectangle. I'm going to click on the Expert, and I'm going to change the draw mode from normal to outline. Now I have an outline of this rectangle. You can see the colors are off a little bit, so if I need to go back and readjust this, I can. I have a color picker here that I can pick on and choose anywhere in the scene to choose a color. So I'll just choose the same color as this Noggi and then copy these color swatches down. The lower right though, maybe I want it to kind of fade off, so I'll just make this black, and you can see how that kind of looks like it's fading off there. So let's turn the TA and SA off, and you can kind of see the real example here. I also want to add a logo, so let's grab another group here. We'll call this one logo. We're going to go back into our server, grab our logo and throw it as a subcontainer. We're going to click on our logo. We're going to bring it up in Z space and then reposition it up into the lower left, roughly, something right about there. Now, I just need to really add some text. There are some like little design elements that we could always add to, but for right now, we're just going to keep this and move forward with adding some text. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and then we're going to go find our fonts. So I'm going to add a new group here, and I'm just going to call this our headline text. I'm going to add our font into that group, and again, I will readjust the Z position by bringing this forward. I'm going to add a black material into it, so I'm going to go into the server, into the M tab, drag the black material onto my font. I'm going to reposition our font to position it over the white here, and let's scale it down so we can make it any size that you want. I'm going to go into the text editor, change this text here. We're going to call this headline text. We're going to change the type from geometry to texture. Let's go into the built-ins, and while we're here, we might as well set that max scale. So I'm going to use the built-ins, go into the container plugins, into the tools folder, and grab our max size. So drop this onto our text. I'm going to go ahead and just rename our text container here a while. I'm going to click on our max size. Let's readjust this down to about 7 or 6. Let's try 6, and then we'll type in 700 and try this out. So I come into my text, and as I start typing, it's a little bit off, so let's take this down to roughly 600 and some change. If I go back into the text, it should reach that right edge and then begin to scale our text down. So that's good enough for me for right now. Let's copy this text. So we're going to make it the subline. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that whole group, change the name here. We'll open up this group. We can rename this as well. We'll get rid of the black material and just slide this down on the Y position. We'll slide it over a little bit on the X, and we'll want to make it a little bit smaller. So let's go into our max size plugin and readjust it down 1 or 2 points. So let's go to 0.45. Again, you can hold down Control to get smaller numbers. We'll readjust it on the Y a little bit, and we could probably adjust our max width out to a little bit more this time. So if we come into our text and start typing, we can add this to about 800 or 900 or so, and that will give us a little bit more room to type. So now we just need the text for this plate here. So I'm again going to create a new group, and we'll just call this like full screen text. I'll drag my font down in here, so I'll go into my server, into my F tab, drag our font into here. We'll bring it up in Z position so that it's in front of everything. We'll also want to change the type to texture, and we're going to change the scale here to something a little bit smaller. Let's go down to about 0.40, maybe a little bit more. That's good enough. We'll reposition this here. We have our orientation set to left, so this is where I want it to start. Instead of using the max size to constrain the portions on this text, we're going to use something a little bit different. So first I'm just going to add some text in here to fill out the area. So I begin typing. Before I type any more, what I'm going to do is go into this tab in the text box. It's called Special. This will allow us to kind of constrain an area right in this text box. So I have my Special tab highlighted. I'm turning on this text box. Now, you may not see anything until you actually activate the bounding box, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on the BB. When I do that, we get this orange area here, or this orange bounding box. This orange bounding box is the text box, and we have a width and a height here. So as I adjust the width of this text box here, I just kind of want to match where the outline of the green is. So I'll adjust the width and the height to do it. And then to test it, when we come back up here and start typing, you can see that when we type, it automatically wraps. I'm not hitting enter or anything. I'm just keep typing here and it will go off. The one caveat being that you need to tell it, do you want it to wrap on a space or any? So if there's no spaces, it will just wrap and cut off a word wherever. But if there is a space, it's going to wrap this word or text wherever the spaces fall. So up in my text, you can see it's all one line. I never hit enter and it automatically wrapped here. So this should be fine for us as they do come in here and type. Like I said, they'll reach the right edge, and as soon as they wrap on a space, it will auto wrap for them. So we're just going to leave that as is. Now I also said you could add some little design elements like that. So for instance, to give you an example of what I mean, let's say we just wanted to add a little bit extra. So I'll go into my built-ins here, grab a rectangle, I'll slide this down into this little box here. We'll bring it up in Z position here, and let's go into the rectangle editor to adjust it. So we'll adjust the height to match the height of this green box, which is roughly about there, let's say. We'll also adjust the width here. I'm going to turn on my use vertex colors. I'm going to use my color picker to grab this color again. I'm just going to slide these colors onto each thing, and you see how it colored that rectangle. I'm going to slide this to the left so we can place this over here, and if we want to even lower the opacity somewhat of this rectangle, we can too, so we can get a little bit of a texture showing through there. All right, so I think this is pretty much set up design-wise. Next step we could do is go ahead and start animating this. So I'm going to go ahead and click save and then get ready to animate this.